The Toy Story movies are fantastic. These films tell a heartfelt story about friendship, loyalty, and growing up. The characters are memorable, the humor works for both kids and adults, and each movie brings something new while staying true to what made the series special in the first place. These aren't just good animated movies. They're good movies in general. Their strong storytelling, memorable characters, and emotional depth make them stand out regardless of genre. One of the biggest reasons the Toy Story movies are so great is that the characters are incredibly easy to care about. From the very first movie, Woody and Buzz feel like real people despite being toys. Woody is loyal and caring, but he's also jealous and insecure. Buzz is brave and confident, but he's also clueless about who he really is. They have flaws, they make mistakes, and they grow from them. That's what makes them interesting. The supporting characters are great too. Whether it's Rex, Ham, Slinky Dog, Jesse, or Mr. Potato Head, each toy has a distinct personality that makes them memorable. Even characters with limited screen time leave a lasting impression. Another reason the series works so well is its ability to balance humor and emotion. The movies are genuinely funny, with plenty of jokes and visual gags that keep things entertaining. But they also know when to slow down and hit you emotionally. One moment you're laughing at Buzz trying to fly, and the next you're watching a scene about friendship, loss, or growing up. The emotional moments never feel forced because they're built on characters and relationships that the audience already cares about. The themes are another major strength of the franchise. At its core, Toy Story is about much more than toys coming to life. It's about friendship, loyalty, purpose, change, and learning to move forward. These are themes that everyone can relate to regardless of age. Kids can enjoy the adventure and comedy, while adults can connect with the deeper messages. That's part of what makes the movies timeless. They speak to different people in different ways. The writing deserves a lot of credit as well. The stories are carefully structured, the dialogue feels natural, and the characters are consistently well developed. Every movie introduces conflict that feels meaningful rather than manufactured. The emotional payoffs work because the writers take the time to build toward them. Nothing feels rushed. The films trust the audience to understand what's happening without constantly explaining everything. What's especially impressive is that each movie has something meaningful to say. The first Toy Story is about jealousy, friendship, and accepting change. Toy Story 2 explores self-worth and the fear of being forgotten. Toy Story 3 focuses on growing up and letting go. Toy Story 4 looks at finding a new purpose and accepting that life doesn't always go according to plan. Even though the movies share many themes, each one approaches them from a different angle. That's why the sequels feel necessary rather than repetitive. The voice acting is another reason these movies stand out. Tom Hanks and Tim Allen bring so much personality to Woody and Buzz that it's hard to imagine anyone else playing those roles. The supporting cast is equally strong. The performances help make the characters feel believable and emotionally authentic. A great animated character needs a great voice behind them, and Toy Story has one of the strongest voice casts in animation. The world itself is also incredibly creative. The idea of toys secretly coming to life when humans aren't around is simple, but it opens the door to endless possibilities. Everyday locations become exciting environments when viewed from a toy's perspective. A bedroom becomes a massive landscape. A moving truck becomes a dangerous obstacle course. A daycare center becomes a prison. The movies constantly find clever ways to make ordinary places feel fresh and exciting. Another thing that makes Toy Story special is how well it appeals to both children and adults. Many animated movies are designed primarily for kids, but Toy Story never talks down to its audience. Children can enjoy the colorful characters and exciting adventures, while older viewers can appreciate the emotional depth and mature themes. That's a difficult balance to achieve, yet Toy Story manages it consistently. The quality of the sequels is also remarkable. Many franchises struggle to justify continuing beyond the original film. Toy Story is one of the rare exceptions. Each sequel expands the world, develops the characters, and introduces new ideas. Instead of feeling like cash grabs, they feel like natural continuations of the story. That's a big reason why the franchise has remained respected for so many years. The sense of nostalgia is another huge factor. For many people, Toy Story was a major part of their childhood. But the movies don't rely on nostalgia alone. They actually explore the idea of nostalgia within the story itself. The toys represent childhood memories, and the films examine what happens when people grow older and move on. This makes the emotional moments feel personal for many viewers because they reflect experiences we've all had in our own lives. The friendship between Woody and Buzz deserves special attention because it's one of the best friendships in animation. Their relationship starts with rivalry and jealousy. Over time, they learn to trust each other, support one another, and become true friends. Their bond feels earned because we've watched it develop across multiple movies. It's not just something we're told exists. We actually see it grow. Finally, the emotional payoffs are some of the strongest in any animated franchise. The Toy Story movies build emotional connections with their audience and then reward that investment with memorable moments that stay with people for years. Whether it's Buzz realizing he's a toy, Jessie remembering her old owner, Andy giving away his toys, or Woody finding a new path in life, these scenes resonate because they're tied to universal experiences. They remind us of friendship, change, loss, and growing up. Those emotions are something everyone understands. And that's really what separates Toy Story from most animated movies. These aren't just great animated films. They're great films, period. They tell meaningful stories, create unforgettable characters, and explore themes that remain relevant no matter how old you are. Decades after the first movie was released, people are still talking about them, still connecting with them, and still finding new things to appreciate. That's the mark of a truly special franchise. In this video, let's talk about the Toy Story movies and explain why they're much better than the Sword Art Online anime series.
If you're unsure about the ending of Toy Story 3, then you definitely came to the right place. Here's the ending explained. After being transported to the landfill, the toys are about to get incinerated, but luckily they're saved at the last moment by the aliens. Afterwards, we see that Lotso is found by a garbage truck driver who ties him to the truck's grill. The toys then get on another garbage truck and go back to Andy's house. Andy is about to go to college, but Woody leaves a note for Andy with Bonnie's address. Andy goes to Bonnie's house and gives all his toys to her. Andy and Bonnie play with the toys for a bit, then Andy heads off to college. One of the main themes of the movie is moving on. Throughout the Toy Story series, Woody has always had a strong connection to Andy. However, in this movie, Woody has to learn to let go and move on. There will be a day when Andy grows up and no longer needs the toys anymore, and that day has finally come. The same can be said for Andy. You can see that Andy was very reluctant to give Woody away to Bonnie. He doesn't want to let go of Woody either. However, Andy also has to move on. He doesn't need the toys anymore since he's much older and he's going away to college. Everyone can relate to the theme of the movie. We've all had to learn to let go of certain things, so we know exactly how the characters feel. It really is a perfect way to wrap up the whole Toy Story series. But if this is the perfect ending for the Toy Story series, then why are they making another Toy Story movie? Well, Toy Story 4 director Josh Cooley explained that while the story about Andy and his toys was completed, there were still a lot more storytelling possibilities for the individual characters. Additionally, Toy Story 4 was actually being secretly written before Toy Story 3 even came out. Josh Cooley said that writer Andrew Stanton already started the outline of Toy Story 4 while Toy Story 3 was still being finished. However, Andrew Stanton kept it a secret so most people at Pixar didn't know about it. Furthermore, Toy Story 3 was supposed to have a much darker ending. During the incinerator scene, every toy was going to be incinerated. Yes, that's right. There was a version of Toy Story 3 where all the toys did not make it in the end. Toy Story 3 director Lee Unkrich even confirmed this ending himself. He said that they came up with this ending as a joke. The screen would cut directly to the credits before the toys were saved. This would leave a clear implication that the toys were incinerated. However, Lee Unkrich said that the movie wouldn't have had the uplifting ending that it actually has, so the darker ending was scrapped. Well, that's it for this video. What did you think of Toy Story 3? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. If you're unsure about the ending of Toy Story 4, then you definitely came to the right place. Here's the ending explained. After the toys save Forky from the antique shop, they try to make it back to Bonnie's RV. On the way there, Gabby sees a little girl who's crying because she's lost. Gabby goes to comfort the little girl and is finally adopted by her. In another surprising twist, we see that Woody decides to stay with Bo Peep instead of going back to Bonnie. The movie ends with Woody, Bo Peep, and the other toys helping lost toys find new owners. The main theme of the movie is finding a sense of purpose and identity. Gabby always wanted Harmony to play with her, but she was defective and had a broken voice box. Gabby thought that if she finally found a working voice box, then Harmony would play with her. However, it turns out that Harmony doesn't like Gabby's new voice box and outright rejects her. Gabby has lost her sense of purpose, but she's able to find another purpose when she sees the little girl crying. It goes to show that there's always more opportunities that lie ahead, and you would never know it unless you venture out and look for those opportunities. The exact same thing can be said for Woody. Throughout the Toy Story series, Woody's purpose was always to be Andy's toy. In this movie, it's even explained that Woody has never gotten over Andy. Woody always felt important to Andy. However, Andy is now in college and doesn't need Woody anymore. Woody has lost his sense of purpose, but he thought that being Bonnie's Bonnie's toy was his new purpose. Unfortunately, Bonnie doesn't really want to play with Woody, so Woody once again has lost his sense of purpose. Woody even tells Bo Peep that saving Forky is the only thing he has left to do. Woody was saving Forky because he needed Bonnie, not because Bonnie really needed Forky. At the end of the movie, Woody realizes that there's more to life than just being a child's play toy. He has come to terms with the fact that Bonnie doesn't really care about him. That's why Woody decided to stay with Bo Peep instead of going back to Bonnie. He has discovered a new purpose in life, and that purpose is helping lost toys find new owners. The new characters in this movie perfectly represent the theme of purpose as well. Forky always thought that he was nothing more than just trash. However, Woody was able to explain that Bonnie needed Forky. Forky then realized that his purpose was to be with Bonnie. I'm sure that everyone watching can relate to the theme of this movie. We've all had to find a purpose in life. It's the loneliest feeling to not know who you are. Sometimes we think that we found a purpose, but it turns out that it's not the case. However, there will always be more opportunities in life to find a new purpose. So the big question is, will there be a Toy Story 5? Well, on the Ellen DeGeneres show, Tom Hanks said that Toy Story 4 would be the final Toy Story movie, but Toy Story producer Mark Nielsen said that there might be another Toy Story movie, but not anytime soon. Mark Nielsen said that Pixar doesn't have any other sequels planned anytime soon. Toy Story 4 does set up a couple interesting new directions for the Toy Story franchise, so Toy Story 5 could follow Woody and Bo Peep's new life, or perhaps it could be another movie focusing on Forky. Well, that's it for this video. What did you think of Toy Story 4? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Toy Story 4 is coming out soon. How did the movie get made? Here's the development of Toy Story 4. Lee Unkrich, the director of Toy Story 3, said in a 2010 interview that Pixar was not planning on making a fourth Toy Story movie. However, Disney officially announced Toy Story 4 during an investor's call on November 6, 2014. John Lasseter, the director of the first two Toy Story movies, was scheduled to direct the movie. He explained that Toy Story 4 was going to be a love story, and the reason Pixar decided to make the movie is because of their true passion for the series. Pixar president Jim Morris said that Toy Story 4 was going to be a romantic comedy, and he also explained that it would not be a continuation of the third movie, but rather a separate story from it. In March 2015, Variety reported that Josh Cooley was going to be the co-director of Toy Story 4, and in July 2017, John Lasseter announced that he would be stepping down as director, which meant that Josh Cooley would be the sole director of Toy Story 4. Josh Cooley said that Toy Story 4 was going to focus on Woody and Bo Peep's relationship. Bo Peep was not in Toy Story 3, so she was brought back into this movie to rekindle the romantic interest between Woody and Bo Peep. Furthermore, Bo Peep is a lost toy, which is something Woody has feared throughout the Toy Story series. Voice recording for the movie began on September 28, 2018. Tim Allen, the voice of Buzz Lightyear, said that the movie's story was so emotional that he couldn't even get through the last scene. Additionally, Tom Hanks, the voice of Woody, said the movie's ending scene was a moment in history. By January 30th, 2019, Tim Allen and Tom Hanks had finished recording their lines. Most of the previous voice actors will return for Toy Story 4. Don Rickles, the voice of Mr. Potato Head, passed away before he recorded his lines for the movie. However, Pixar was able to use previous material, such as unused lines from the first three Toy Story movies, to include Don Rickles' voice in the movie. Tony Hale was cast as Forky. He definitely fits the role because he has played similarly panicked characters. For example, Buster Bluth on Arrested Development and Gary Walsh on Veep. Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele were cast to play Ducky and Bunny, a pair of Carnival plush toys. They were brought on to provide some improvised comedy. Furthermore, Keanu Reeves will be voicing Duke Kaboom, a Canadian Daredevil toy. He was actually allowed to develop his own riffs on the character. Madeline McGraw, the voice of Maddie McGear in Cars 3, will be replacing Emily Hunt as the voice of Bonnie. Randy Newman composed the music for the movie. He composed the music for the previous three Toy Story movies as well. Randy Newman wrote two new songs for the movie, The Ballad of the Lonesome Cowboy and I Can't Let You Throw Yourself Away. Toy Story 4 was originally planned to be released on June 16, 2017. However, it was pushed back to June 15, 2018, and Cars 3 was given the June 16, 2017 release date. Toy Story 4 was then pushed back again to June 21, 2019, and Incredibles 2 was given the June 15, 2018 release date. Toy Story 4 actually set records on Fandango for the most tickets sold by an animated movie in the first 24 hours. Toy Story 4 is projected to make about $180 to $200 million in its opening weekend. On Rotten Tomatoes, Toy Story 4 currently has a 100% rating, and on Metacritic, Toy Story 4 currently has a score of 84 out of 100. Toy Story 4 is planned to be the last in the series. However, we were told that Toy Story 3 was going to be the last Toy Story movie, so a Toy Story 5 isn't impossible. Toy Story 4 is sure to make tons of money, so it's actually pretty likely that another Toy Story movie will be made, albeit not anytime soon. Well, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
As you can see, the Toy Story movies are truly special. They aren't just entertaining animated films that people watch once and forget about. They're stories that stay with audiences for years, sometimes even decades, after they first see them. Few movies manage to create the kind of emotional connection that Toy Story has created with millions of people around the world. What makes these films stand out is their ability to connect with viewers at every stage of life. As a child, you might watch Toy Story because of the fun characters, exciting adventures, and funny moments. As a teenager, you might start to appreciate the friendships, the character growth, and the emotional struggles the toys face. As an adult, you begin to understand the deeper themes about growing up, finding your purpose, dealing with change, and learning how to let go. The movies evolve with the audience, which is one of the reasons they continue to resonate with so many people. The characters are a huge part of that success. Woody, Buzz, Jessie, Rex, Ham, Slinky, and the rest of the gang feel like old friends. Their personalities are memorable, their relationships feel genuine, and their struggles often mirror challenges that real people face. Even though they're toys, their emotions feel authentic. We care about what happens to them because the movies take the time to make them feel like real characters rather than simple cartoon figures. The storytelling is equally impressive. Each movie tells a compelling and meaningful story while building on the themes and relationships established in previous entries. The franchise never relies solely on nostalgia or familiarity. Instead, it continues to introduce new ideas, new challenges, and new emotional journeys for its characters. That's why the sequels feel worthwhile rather than unnecessary. The emotional moments are another reason these movies are so beloved. Whether it's Woody and Buzz learning to trust each other, Jessie remembering her former owner, the toys facing uncertainty about their future, or Woody discovering a new purpose in life, the series is filled with scenes that leave a lasting impression. These moments work because they're rooted in strong character development and meaningful relationships. The films earn their emotional payoffs rather than simply demanding an emotional reaction from the audience. The themes explored throughout the series are also surprisingly deep. Friendship, loyalty, purpose, belonging, change, and growing older are topics that affect everyone. The movies explore these ideas in a way that's easy for children to understand while still being meaningful for adults. That's an incredibly difficult balance to achieve, yet Toy Story does it better than almost any other animated franchise. What's especially remarkable is how consistent the series has been. Many franchises struggle to maintain quality over multiple installments, but Toy Story has remained one of the most respected names in animation for decades. Each movie contributes something valuable to the overall story while staying true to the heart of the franchise. At the end of the day, the Toy Story movies represent some of the best storytelling that animation has to offer. They're funny, emotional, creative, and thoughtfully written. They feature memorable characters, powerful themes, and moments that continue to resonate with audiences long after the credits roll. That's why Toy Story isn't just one of the greatest animated franchises ever made. It's one of the greatest film franchises ever made, regardless of genre. The fact that people are still discussing, celebrating, and connecting with these movies decades after the original release is proof of just how special they truly are. Sword Art Online, on the other hand, is a boring dumpster fire. The writing is weak, the pacing is rushed, and so much of the series' potential is completely wasted. What makes it especially frustrating is that the core premise is actually interesting. The idea of thousands of players trapped inside a virtual reality game where death has real consequences sounds like the setup for an incredible story. Unfortunately, the show rarely lives up to that promise. One of the biggest problems is the pacing. Instead of fully exploring its fascinating premise, the series rushes through major events at an absurd speed. Important developments fly by before the audience has time to process them. Relationships form almost instantly, major conflicts come and go, and entire sections of the story feel like they're being fast-forwarded. Rather than taking the time to build tension and develop its world, the show constantly jumps ahead to the next plot point. The writing doesn't help matters either. Many of the characters feel underdeveloped and forgettable. Despite being surrounded by a large cast, the story often revolves entirely around Carito. As a result, Many supporting characters end up feeling less like actual people and more like accessories to the main character. Their motivations, struggles, and growth are rarely explored in enough depth to make them truly memorable. Then there's Kirito himself. For many viewers, he's one of the least interesting protagonists in modern anime. He's incredibly powerful, rarely struggles for long, and often feels more like a wish fulfillment fantasy than an actual character. Great protagonists have flaws that challenge them and force them to grow. Kirito often feels like he already has all the answers. When a character constantly succeeds and rarely faces lasting consequences, it's difficult to remain invested in their journey. The series also has a habit of introducing interesting ideas only to abandon them. Virtual reality, artificial intelligence, digital identity, online communities, and the psychological effects of living in a game world are all fascinating topics. Yet the show frequently pushes these concepts aside in favor of generic action scenes and predictable drama. Instead of exploring the deeper implications of its setting, it often settles for the easiest possible route. The emotional moments don't fare much better. The series clearly wants viewers to feel attached to its characters, but many relationships develop so quickly that the emotional payoffs don't feel earned. Rather than carefully building connections over time, the story often expects the audience to care simply because it says they should. Compare that to a franchise like Toy Story, where emotional moments are built on years of character development and relationship building. The difference is night and day. Even the world building can be disappointing. The virtual worlds look interesting on the surface, but many of them feel underexplored. The series constantly introduces new settings, new rules, and new concepts, but rarely spends enough time developing them. Instead of creating rich, fully realized worlds, it often feels like the story is rushing to the next arc before the current one has reached its full potential. What makes Sword Art Online so frustrating isn't just that it's bad in certain areas. It's that it constantly hints at the possibility of being great. The foundation is there. The premise is there. The resources were there. Yet time and time again, the series chooses shortcuts over depth, convenience over strong storytelling, and spectacle over substance. At the end of the day, Sword Art Online feels like a series that had all the ingredients needed for something special but never figured out what to do with them. Instead of becoming a thoughtful exploration of life inside a virtual world, it became a messy collection of wasted opportunities, rushed storylines, and underdeveloped ideas. For every interesting concept it introduces, there seems to be another disappointing decision waiting around the corner. That's what makes the show such a train wreck. Not because it had no potential, but because it had so much potential and squandered it. The fictional game design of Sword Art Online is terrible as well. The mechanics, systems, and overall gameplay often don't make much sense when you stop and think about them. The series wants viewers to believe that Sword Art Online is this revolutionary virtual reality MMORPG that attracted thousands of players, but many of its design decisions seem like they would drive people away rather than keep them invested. If this were a real game released in the real world, it would probably be remembered as one of the biggest gaming disasters of all time. Let's start with the combat system. For a game that's supposedly the future of gaming, combat often feels surprisingly limited. Players mostly swing swords and activate special skills while standing in place for lengthy animations. In a real MMORPG, players expect a variety of playstyles, strategic options, and ways to customize their characters. Sword Art Online often feels less like a deep role-playing game and more like a basic action game with MMO elements attached to it. The balance is another major issue. Throughout the series, certain players become absurdly powerful compared to everyone else. Kirito in particular gains access to abilities and advantages that make him vastly stronger than most of the player base. In a real online game, balance problems like that would create enormous frustration. Players generally don't enjoy games where a tiny number of individuals can dominate everyone else with little competition. Developers spend years trying to prevent exactly that kind of imbalance. Then there's the issue of information. Thousands of players are trapped in a deadly game where making mistakes can literally kill them, yet critical information about bosses, mechanics, and progression often seems difficult to access. In a real MMORPG, communities quickly create guides, databases, maps, spreadsheets, and resources to help players understand the game. The idea that players would spend years struggling with basic information in such a high-stakes environment can feel hard to believe. The progression system raises a lot of questions too. Some players appear capable of advancing at dramatically faster rates than others, creating massive power gaps throughout the game. While progression differences exist in every MMORPG, most successful games try to prevent situations where the average player has virtually no chance of catching up. If new or casual players constantly felt hopelessly outclassed, many would simply quit. The boss encounters are also questionable from a design perspective. The series often presents bosses as massive threats that require careful planning and coordination, which sounds great on paper. The problem is that the rules behind many of these encounters are often vague or poorly explained. Good game design relies on players understanding challenges and developing strategies to overcome them. If encounters constantly depend on hidden information, unexpected mechanics, or last-minute revelations, players tend to become frustrated rather than engaged. Another issue is the apparent lack of quality-of-life features. The game frequently feels inconvenient in ways that don't seem intentional or enjoyable. Successful MMORPGs usually include systems that make inventory management, communication, travel, and group formation easier. Sword Art Online often presents these activities as unnecessarily difficult, which might create drama for the story but would likely annoy actual players. The economy raises questions as well. We're told that players buy, sell, craft, and trade items, but the details often feel underdeveloped. In real MMORPGs, economies are complex systems influenced by supply, demand, resource availability, crafting costs, and player behavior. Sword Art Online rarely explores these mechanics in depth, making the game world feel less believable as an actual online game. Even the class and build systems seem strangely limited. MMORPG players love experimenting with different character builds, roles, and strategies. Some enjoy being tanks. Others prefer healers, support characters, damage dealers, crafters, merchants, or explorers. Sword Art Online often focuses so heavily on frontline sword fighters that the game can feel narrow compared to what most MMO players would expect. The biggest problem, though, is that many aspects of Sword Art Online feel designed to make the story work rather than to create a believable game. Instead of asking, would players actually enjoy this? The series often seems to ask, would this create a dramatic scene? That's fine for storytelling purposes, but it makes the game itself harder to take seriously. When people discuss great fictional games, they often point to worlds that feel like they could genuinely exist. You can imagine people spending thousands of hours playing them because the systems seem fun, rewarding, and well thought out. Sword Art Online doesn't always achieve that. The more you examine the mechanics, the more cracks begin to appear. That's why the game's design falls apart under scrutiny. It might work as a backdrop for an anime, but as an actual MMORPG, it would likely face endless criticism from players. Between the balance issues, questionable progression systems, unclear mechanics, and lack of believable game design, it's difficult to imagine Sword Art Online succeeding in the real world. If a company launched a game with many of these problems today, players would probably tear it apart in reviews, complain endlessly on forums, and move on to something better within a matter of months. The reason Sword Art Online is such a disaster is that it often feels like there was never a clear plan in the first place. The series comes across as a story that was stitched together on the fly, with little concern for consistency, long-term storytelling, or logical development. Instead of feeling like a carefully crafted narrative, it feels like a random collection of ideas thrown together whenever the plot needs something new to happen. This explains so many of the show's problems. The pacing is a mess because the story constantly rushes from one idea to the next without taking the time to properly develop anything. Interesting concepts are introduced and then abandoned. Characters appear, receive a brief moment in the spotlight, and then become irrelevant. Entire storylines feel incomplete because the series seems more interested in chasing the next shiny idea than finishing the one it already started. The result is a story that feels directionless. Rather than building toward meaningful payoffs, Sword Art Online often feels like it's improvising from episode to episode. New abilities suddenly appear. New mechanics are introduced whenever they're convenient. Plot developments happen because the story wants them to happen, not because they naturally follow from what came before. The lack of planning is especially obvious in the world building. The series constantly introduces new virtual worlds, new rules, and new systems, but very little of it feels fully thought out. Instead of creating deep, believable settings, the show throws ideas at the audience and hopes nobody asks too many questions. The more closely you examine the world, the more it falls apart. The characters suffer just as much. Most of the cast feels shallow, underdeveloped, and forgettable. Their personalities are often limited to a few basic traits, and many exist solely to support Kirito. Rather than feeling like real people with their own goals and struggles, they often feel like plot devices. They're there when the story needs them and disappear when it doesn't. Kirito himself is one of the biggest examples of the series' poor writing. Instead of creating a compelling protagonist with meaningful flaws and challenges, the story bends over backward to make him look impressive. He constantly gains advantages, wins fights, and receives praise from everyone around him. Rather than earning his success through growth and development, it often feels like the story simply hands him victories because he's the main character. The worst part is that the series repeatedly wastes opportunities that could have made it genuinely interesting. The premise of being trapped inside a deadly virtual reality game had enormous potential. A talented writer could have explored survival, psychology, community building, leadership, fear, and countless other themes. Instead, much of that potential is thrown away in favor of rushed storylines, shallow character drama, and increasingly ridiculous plot developments. Every time the series stumbles across an interesting idea, it somehow finds a way to mishandle it. Every time it has an opportunity to slow down and develop its characters, it rushes ahead. Every time it could explore the consequences of its world, it chooses the easiest possible solution instead. That's what makes Sword Art Online so frustrating. It's not just bad. It's bad in ways that constantly draw attention to how much better it could have been. The series is filled with wasted opportunities, abandoned ideas, weak writing, and poor execution. What should have been one of the most compelling stories in anime instead became an example of how not to handle a great premise. By the end, the entire thing feels less like a coherent story and more like a pile of half-finished ideas held together by convenience and wish fulfillment. The writing is sloppy, the characters are weak, the pacing is terrible, the world building is shallow, and the storytelling lacks focus. It's a train wreck from beginning to end, and the deeper you look into it, the worse it gets. Just avoid Sword Art Online. There are so many better movies and shows you could be spending your time on. With thousands of TV shows, movies, anime series, and animated films available today, there's simply no reason to settle for something as disappointing as Sword Art Online. Instead of wasting dozens of hours on weak writing, rushed storytelling, and wasted potential, you could be watching stories that are actually well-written, emotionally engaging, and worth remembering. The Toy Story franchise is a perfect example. Those movies respect their audience. They feature strong character development, meaningful themes, memorable emotional moments, and storytelling that has stood the test of time. Years after watching them, people still remember the characters, the lessons, and the iconic scenes. That's the difference between a genuinely great story and a forgettable one. Great stories stay with you. They leave an impact. Toy Story does exactly that. But since you've stuck around until this point in the video, let's talk about some other Pixar movies as well. Toy Story may be Pixar's most famous franchise, but it is far from the only great thing the studio has produced. In fact, Pixar has built one of the most impressive track records in animation history, creating movie after movie that has connected with audiences around the world. Let's start with Monsters Incorporated. On the surface, it's a fun comedy about monsters who scare children for a living. But beneath that simple premise is a surprisingly heartfelt story about friendship, responsibility, and challenging the assumptions you've always believed. Sully and Mike have fantastic chemistry, the world is creative and imaginative, and the emotional ending remains one of Pixar's best. Then there's Finding Nemo, which is easily one of the studio's most beloved films. What begins as an adventure across the ocean gradually becomes a touching story about family, trust, and learning to let go. Marlin's journey from an overprotective father to someone willing to trust his son is handled beautifully. The movie is funny, emotional, visually stunning, and packed with memorable characters. The Incredibles is another standout. Even after all these years, it remains one of the best superhero movies ever made. What makes it work isn't just the action. It's the family dynamics. The Parr family feels believable, their struggles feel relatable, and the movie balances humor, action, and emotional storytelling exceptionally well. Many superhero films have come and gone, but The Incredibles continues to stand out because of its strong writing and memorable characters. Ratatouille is another Pixar masterpiece. The idea of a rat wanting to become a chef sounds ridiculous on paper, yet the movie turns that premise into an inspiring story about passion, creativity, and following your dreams. It contains some of the studio's strongest themes and one of the most memorable endings in animation. The message that talent can come from unexpected places remains just as powerful today as it was when the movie was first released. Up deserves recognition as well. Most people remember the opening montage, and for good reason. It manages to tell an emotional story about love, loss, and growing older in just a few minutes. But the rest of the movie is excellent too. Carl's journey from a bitter old man to someone willing to open his heart again gives the film a level of emotional depth that many animated movies never achieve. WALL-E is another remarkable achievement. For long stretches of the movie, there is very little dialogue, yet the storytelling remains incredibly effective. Through its visuals, characters, and atmosphere, WALL-E explores themes of loneliness, environmental neglect, consumerism, and human connection. It takes risks that most animated movies wouldn't dare attempt, and the result is one of Pixar's most unique films. Coco is another example of Pixar at its best. The movie explores family, memory, and legacy, while introducing audiences to a vibrant and beautifully realized world. Its emotional climax is one of the most powerful scenes Pixar has ever created. Few movies manage to balance humor, music, adventure, and heartfelt storytelling as effectively as Coco does. Inside Out also deserves a mention. Taking human emotions and turning them into characters could have easily become a gimmick. Instead, Pixar used the concept to create a thoughtful and surprisingly mature exploration of growing up, change, and emotional health. It's the kind of movie that works on completely different levels depending on the viewer's age. What's impressive about Pixar isn't just that they've made a few good movies. Is how often they've managed to create films that resonate with audiences of all ages. Their best movies combine creativity, strong writing, emotional depth, memorable characters, and meaningful themes. They aren't simply entertaining. They give people something to think about long after the credits roll. That's why I'd recommend spending your time with movies like Toy Story, Monsters Incorporated, Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, Up, WALL-E, Coco, and Inside Out instead. These are films that actually have something to offer. They tell compelling stories. They develop their characters. They explore meaningful ideas. Most importantly, they're memorable. At the end of the day, there are only so many hours in a week. If you're going to spend your time watching something, why not choose stories that are genuinely well made? Pixar's best movies have earned their reputation because they're funny, emotional, creative, and thoughtfully written. Decades from now, people will probably still be talking about many of these films. The same can't be said for Sword Art Online. Sword Art Online is pretty much the exact opposite of the Pixar movies. Where Pixar consistently demonstrates strong storytelling, memorable characters, emotional depth, and meaningful themes, Sword Art Online manages to fall short in nearly every category. It is a series that takes great ideas and turns them into disappointing results through weak execution, poor planning, and inconsistent writing. One of the biggest differences is the quality of the storytelling. Pixar movies are carefully structured. Their stories have clear goals, logical progression, and satisfying payoffs. Important events feel earned because the groundwork is established long beforehand. The writers understand where the story is going and how to get there. Sword Art Online often feels like the complete opposite. Story arcs jump from one idea to another without enough development. Important concepts are introduced and abandoned. Major events happen so quickly that they lose much of their impact. Instead of feeling carefully constructed, the story often feels rushed and unfocused. The character writing is another area where the difference becomes impossible to ignore. Pixar creates characters that audiences remember for years. Woody, Buzz, Sully, Mike, Marlin, Remy, Carl, Wally, and countless others have distinct personalities, strengths, flaws, and meaningful character arcs. They grow throughout their stories and learn important lessons along the way. Sword Art Online's cast is nowhere near that level. Many characters receive limited development and exist primarily to support the main character. Their personalities can feel shallow, their motivations underexplored, and their growth inconsistent. Rather than feeling like fully realized individuals, many of them feel like plot devices that exist to move the story forward whenever necessary. Then there's the emotional impact. Pixar has built its reputation on creating emotional moments that resonate with audiences of all ages. Whether it's Andy giving away his toys, Carl remembering Ellie, Bing Bong's sacrifice, or Miguel singing to his grandmother, these moments work because they are supported by strong character development and careful storytelling. The audience becomes emotionally invested before the movie asks them to feel something. Sword Art Online frequently tries to create emotional moments as well, but many of them feel rushed or unearned. Relationships often develop too quickly. Dramatic scenes arrive before the audience has had enough time to become invested, and emotional payoffs rarely carry the same weight. Instead of creating lasting emotional connections, the series often relies on immediate drama that fades shortly after the episode ends. The themes are another major weakness. Pixar movies usually explore universal ideas that remain relevant regardless of age. Friendship, family, purpose, change, loss, identity, creativity, and growing up are themes that almost everyone can connect with. These ideas are explored thoughtfully and integrated naturally into the story. Sword Art Online introduces interesting concepts but rarely explores them in meaningful depth. The psychological effects of being trapped in a virtual world, the consequences of advanced virtual reality technology, and the ethical questions surrounding artificial intelligence could have formed the foundation for a fascinating series. Instead, these ideas are often pushed aside in favor of action scenes, power fantasies, and plot conveniences. Even the world building suffers by comparison. Pixar creates worlds that feel imaginative, creative, and internally consistent. Whether it's the monster world of Monsters Incorporated, the underwater setting of Finding Nemo, or the land of the dead in Coco, these environments feel thoughtfully designed and carefully developed. Sword Art Online constantly introduces new virtual worlds, but many of them feel underdeveloped. New settings appear, new rules are established, and then the story quickly moves on before fully exploring them. The result is a series filled with locations that seem interesting on the surface but lack depth when examined more closely. The pacing is another major problem. Pixar movies understand the importance of giving scenes room to breathe. They know when to slow down for character development and when to speed up for excitement. Sword Art Online often rushes through important events at an incredible pace. Significant story developments, major character moments, and potentially interesting ideas are frequently skipped over in favor of moving to the next plot point as quickly as possible. What's most frustrating is that Pixar consistently demonstrates how powerful great storytelling can be, while Sword Art Online often serves as an example of wasted potential. Pixar takes simple concepts and turns them into extraordinary stories through excellent execution. Sword Art Online takes extraordinary concepts and turns them into mediocre stories through poor execution. That's why the comparison is so one-sided. Pixar succeeds because it understands the fundamentals of storytelling. It creates compelling characters, meaningful themes, emotional depth, strong pacing, and satisfying narratives. Sword Art Online struggles because it repeatedly falls short in those same areas. The writing is weaker. The characters are less memorable. The emotional moments are less effective. The themes are less developed. The world building is less convincing. The storytelling is less focused. In many ways, Sword Art Online feels like a perfect example of what happens when a great premise is paired with poor execution. Pixar, meanwhile, is a perfect example of what happens when talented storytellers fully commit to developing their ideas. One creates movies that people remember for decades. The other creates a series that people remember mostly for what it could have been. Let's talk about another Pixar movie worth watching.
Luca is a 2021 American computer animated coming-of-age fantasy comedy movie. In this video, I'll break down Luca, explain the ending as well as what's next for Pixar. Let's get started. The movie begins with some people trying to fish at night. They encounter a sea monster and leave. Then we meet Luca Paguro, a preteen sea monster who spends his days herding a school of fish. Luca's parents tell him that he can't go to the surface because the humans might murder him. One day, Luca meets another young sea monster named Alberto Scorfano. Alberto has been on the land several times, and he encourages Luca to follow him. Luca and Alberto transform to humans when they're dry. They go to Alberto's hideout in a small tower, where he has a bunch of human items. Luca sees a poster of a Vespa, which is an Italian scooter. Luca and Alberto spend the next few days trying to make a Vespa from scratch. Luca keeps his surface adventures a secret, but his parents eventually discover the truth. They send Luca to live with his uncle Ugo deeper in the ocean, but Luca runs away to the surface with Alberto, and together they go to the town of Porto Rosso. Luca and Alberto encounter the local bully Ercole Visconti. He's a 5-time winner of the Porto Rosso Cup. Ercole is about to dunk Luca into a fountain, which would reveal his identity as a sea monster, but a young girl named Giulia Marcovaldo comes to save Luca and Alberto. Giulia, Luca, and Alberto decide to team up for the Porto Rosso Cup. Giulia then takes Luca and Alberto to her house for dinner, where she lives with her one-handed father Massimo, who's looking to kill a sea monster. Giulia allows Luca and Alberto to stay in her hideout for the night. In the meantime, Luca's parents can't find him, so they also go to the surface to try and look for him. Massimo takes Luca and Alberto on a fishing trip so they can earn money to enter the race. We learn that there are 3 challenges in the Porto Rosso Cup race: swimming, eating pasta, and riding a bike through town. Giulia will swim, Alberto will eat the pasta, and Luca will ride the bike. Over time, Luca becomes closer to Giulia. She explains that she only spends the summer in Porto Rosso with her father, and during the rest of the year she lives somewhere else in Italy with her mother. Ercole is also suspicious of Luca and Alberto. Alberto is jealous of Luca and Giulia's relationship, so he reveals that he's a sea monster to Giulia. Luca keeps his identity a secret, but Giulia eventually discovers the truth when she splashes water on him. Luca finds Alberto sulking in his hideout. Alberto says that his dad left him, and he's been living on his own ever since. Luca decides to still enter the Porto Rosso Cup race alone. He wears a diving suit during the swimming segment to avoid turning back into a sea monster. It starts raining during the biking segment, but Alberto comes to help Luca. However, Ercole knocks Alberto's umbrella away, and his identity is revealed to everyone. Ercole throws a net at Alberto, but Luca goes into the rain to save him, which also exposes his secret. Giulia bumps into Ercole to prevent him from hurting Luca and Alberto, but everyone sees them. Massimo protects Luca and Alberto, and it turns out that they've won the Porto Rosso Cup. The townspeople realize that sea monsters aren't really bad. Luca is reunited with his parents, and it's revealed that the old ladies are also sea monsters. Luca and Alberto buy the broken down Vespa, but Giulia eventually has to leave town to go back to her mother because the summer is over. It turns out that Alberto sold the Vespa to buy a train ticket for Luca. Luca's parents actually arranged for him to stay with Giulia and her mother. Alberto chooses to stay in Porto Rosso with Massimo. Finally, the movie ends with Luca leaving. During the credits, you can see how Luca and Giulia are happy at school. Luca stays in touch with Alberto by calling him. Alberto is also happy staying with Massimo. Luca and Alberto show the other kids that they're sea monsters. In the post-credit scene, Uncle Ugo explains how living in the deep is a simple life. Overall, Luca is very similar to the 2017 movie Call Me By Your Name. However, director Enrico Casarosa said that this was not intentional, and Luca is about a platonic friendship in that kind of pre-puberty world. Luca is actually inspired by Enrico Casarosa's own childhood growing up in Italy. He and his friend Alberto would often cause a lot of trouble. Here's what he said: "My summers were spent on beaches. I met my best friend when I was 11. I was really shy and I found this troublemaker of a kid who had a completely different life. I wanted to make a movie about those kinds of friendships that help you grow up." While Luca and Alberto are based on real people, Giulia is a completely original character that was created for the movie. Emma Berman, the voice actress of Giulia, talked about this in an interview interview with Laughing Place, the sea monsters in this movie are based on Italian myths and regional folklore. Here's what the filmmakers have said. I always found the old sea monsters on maps really fascinating. The mystery of the sea was so represented in the weird creatures that we used to draw, and that area has a lot of wonderful myths. We were also a bit of outsiders, so it felt right to use sea monsters to express the idea that we felt a little different and not cool as kids. We always liked the idea that the metaphor of being a sea monster can apply to so many different things. There is a theme of openness, showing oneself, and self-acceptance, as well as community acceptance, confronting the idea that there's more to sea monsters than they realize. You know that they've only seen it through one perspective, one lens, and so I think that that's a wonderful theme in the film, which is that those ideas weren't right, and that there's more to learn. We hope that sea monster could be a metaphor for all manners of feeling different, like being a teen or even preteen, any moment where you feel odd. It felt like a wonderful way to talk about that, and having to accept ourselves first, whatever way we feel different. Furthermore, Enrico Casarosa explained how Luca pays homage to many classic Italian filmmakers, like Federico Fellini, and it also has a dash of Hayao Miyazaki in the mix as well. Movies like Stand By Me, Stromboli, and La Terra Trema were also major inspirations for Luca. There are a lot of characters in Luca who are outsiders, either by birth or by choice. Enrico Casarosa talked about this in an interview with Screen Rant. Here's what he said. I think my best friend and I always felt a little nerdy. I remember going through high school in Italy. You have a certain amount of classes and we were the last class. They go A, B, C, D, and we were L. And everybody made fun of L, because we were known to be the losers, because we had a lot of misfits and nerdy kids, and we always felt a little bit that way. We were slightly goofy. We were a little behind, a little more kid-like. We maybe were not very popular. So when I started thinking about being a sea monster, and have something to hide, it felt very connected to that time. I also felt like before I met my best friend, there was just a little bit of loneliness. So not only did we want to make 3 kids who are feeling different, but also they were lonely, and there was a hole in their lives. Julia is odd, but she's also unapologetically herself, which is something that I love that she can teach Luca. She has vulnerability, but she's in their face. Underneath, she's lonely, and she's been really struggling with a bully. So I did love out of those 3 this loneliness and feeling different. Luca is also quite different from your typical coming-of-age story. Producer Andrea Warren explained what draws her to these kinds of movies. Here's what she said. We look back at those coming-of-age years in our own lives, hopefully with quite a bit of empathy. As an adult, you have that desire to go back and tell yourself and anybody else going through it who will listen, it's okay, you're okay. As a parent, you watch your kids trying so badly to fit in, yet what you want to preserve about them is what is special and unique about them, versus them trying to lose all the things that bring their own unique perspectives. There's this desire to tell stories that help inspire kids going through it, to hang on to those aspects of themselves that make them who they are. Luca and Alberto are completely different characters in terms of personality. Jacob Tremblay, the voice actor of Luca, talked about this in an interview with Screen Rant. Here's what he said. It's cool how they're very different. I guess the dynamic is really good, cause in real life, I feel like when you see 2 best friends and it's always so random, like one super tall, the other super short. I remember my best friend was like way above me. So Jack Dylan Grazer voices Alberto in the Luca movie, and he also plays the character Freddie Freeman in Shazam. He talked about the similarities between Alberto and Freddie in an interview with Looper. Here's what he said. You know something? I'm kinda thinking maybe Freddie Freeman and Alberto Scorfano aren't too different. I mean, obviously Freddie Freeman can't jump from a cliff because he's on a crutch, but they're both very confident and they both have a lot of charisma, and their sense of humor is great, and they both think very highly of themselves, despite their insecurities, which is funny. Comparing being in a Disney Pixar film to being part of the DCEU is pretty similar, because they both have such long legacies, and I grew up idolizing both. All of these things that are happening to me, it's unfathomable. I would have never dreamed of these things. I'm so full of gratitude. Luca was originally meant to come out in theaters, but Disney canceled the theatrical release, and decided to put it on their streaming service Disney Plus instead. The people at Pixar who worked on Luca were very demoralized, since Luca wasn't even a premiere access, and there wasn't an upcharge. Enrico Casarosa shared his own feelings about Luca going straight to Disney Plus in a Screen Rant interview. Here's what he said. The example of Soul was felt pretty positively. As a filmmaker, I got excited. Within the difficulty of not going to theaters. Theaters are wonderful, and the communal experience is something we're going to miss. But with the situation we're in right now, it didn't feel very safe to release in theaters, so I started pretty quickly seeing the glass half full here, because it felt exciting to, first of all, show it to families together, and to reach a lot of people. On another level, we put so much detail into Luca. This is what makes us wish to share it in the theater. I think what I love about seeing it on streaming is that you can rewatch it, and so there's another way to re-experience it. We put a lot of layers in there, and we pride ourselves on all those layers. I have moments in the animation of this movie where I'm laughing so hard, because there's someone in the background doing something, and you're not going to see it on the first viewing. Visiting Porto Rosso has so many layers for us, so I'm looking forward to families being able to enjoy it multiple times. That's a wonderful plus. It's been part of our production. It's amazing. We've had to make this in the last year. We had moments where we didn't know if we could finish it in time, or do it all at home, and unfortunately it's impacting even our release, the current state of the world. So Pixar is known for their franchises, like Toy Story, Cars, and The Incredibles. However, they're choosing to prioritize making personal stories instead of sequels. Enrico Casarosa talked about this in an interview with Cinema Blend. Here's what he said: "Personal stories are so important because you need a connection to lead, and I think we have a lot of awesome new movies coming your way we're really excited about. The whole slate lately. I don't know that there was a change of awareness of, we're going to change the route here. There wasn't anything like that. It was just a sense of what sparks. So it really helped me as a new director, having experienced something, and having an instinct about what I was trying to tell. The story about my best friend and I, and how these kinds of friendships help us grow up. I pitched Luca at the beginning of 2016. First of all, I knew I wanted something in the setting of the Italian Riviera. I just love that place, and I think there's something really unique about my summers there. And then it was really about finding the right story for it. The other thing that I've always loved is about changelings. Someone who can appear a certain way, but then is really behind a facade. I love stories of foxes in Japanese folklore that can look human, but their true form is foxes. So those kinds of stories always fascinated me. And then also as a kid, in these little towns on the Riviera, my memory of it was always wondering and imagining, if there is more to these people around, is there more to the old man by the sea? There are several dream sequences in Luca. Andrea Warren also mentioned how they wanted to make the dream sequences different from real life so they would feel special. Additionally, in an interview with Black Girl Nerds, Enrico Casarosa talked about how there were a lot of culturally specific things that he wanted to include in the movie. Here's what he said: "The obvious one, of course, is how do you share the beautiful food, the beauty and taste for food. So even then I was like, okay, well we've got to put focaccia. Focaccia bread is very specifically from the region. If you're Italian and you visit Liguria, you want to have some focaccia. So we wanted to make sure we did that. The villain is always having a focaccia sandwich together with espresso. I knew plenty of kids who were drinking espresso. I still remember that nowadays. That was kind of a strange thing, but that will be part of the story. Then of course, the most obvious one is how do you animate an intense little girl who is Italian? We had huge long discussions about what kind of gesticulation and intensity she would have. It's quite specific and it is wonderful. It was important to not go into stereotypes, but to have that flavor. It's a unique thing. I hope that we can embrace it. In many ways, it's expressive opera. That's another one. I wanted to put as much opera in this. I grew up with that in my house, so we wanted to put some good Barbara of Seville in it. So what's next for Pixar? There's Turning Red, which is coming out on March 11th, 2022. The movie is directed by Domi Shi, who also directed the 2018 short film Bao. In Turning Red, Mei Li is a confident, dorky 13-year-old, torn between staying her mother's dutiful daughter and the chaos of adolescence. And as if changes to her interests, relationships, and body weren't enough, whenever she gets too excited, which for a teenager is practically always, she poofs into a giant red panda. Arya Kurzan will voice Mei Li. Then there's Lightyear, which is coming out on June 17th, 2022. The movie is directed by Angus MacLean, who also co-directed Finding Dory. Lightyear is a sci-fi action adventure, and the definitive origin story of Buzz Lightyear, the pilot who inspired the toy. The film reveals how a young test pilot became the space ranger that we all know him to be today. Chris Evans will voice Buzz Lightyear. What did you think of Luca? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. I personally thought it was pretty great. The animation quality was fantastic, and the voice acting was excellent. The story overall was quite compelling and interesting as well. Be sure to check out some of the other Ending Explained videos on this channel. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. There are several Easter eggs, references, and hidden details in Pixar's new movie Luca. I'll explain some of them in this video. Let's get started. Record. The record player on the boat here is very similar to the one Carl had in the 2009 Pixar movie Up. Names. Luca has a fish named Enrico, which is a reference to the director of this movie, Enrico Casarosa. There's also a fish named Mona Lisa, which is a reference to the Mona Lisa painting by Leonardo da Vinci. Furthermore, Luca's mom is named Daniela, which might be a reference to production designer Daniela Strijleva. Diving helmet. The diving helmet is similar to the one Nemo hides in during the fish tank scene in Finding Nemo. Hayao Miyazaki. Alberto's outfit is very similar to Conan's outfit in the Japanese anime series Future Boy Conan. This series was directed by Hayao Miyazaki. Enrico Casarosa stated that Luca was inspired by Hayao Miyazaki's movies. Moreover, the town is called Porto Rosso, which is a reference to the Studio Ghibli movie Porco Rosso. This movie was directed by Hayao Miyazaki. Porto Rosso also means red port in Italian. The end credits sequence showing sketches of everyone's future adventures is very similar to the end credits sequence of many Studio Ghibli movies, like Kiki's Delivery Service and My Neighbor Totoro. Indiana Jones. The hat here looks very similar to Indiana Jones's hat. Boot. The boot here looks similar to the one in WALL-E that was used to hold the plant. Marcello Mastroianni Mastroianni. You can see a photo of Italian actor Marcello Mastroianni here. Later, someone is watching one of his movies. The movie is Big Deal on Madonna Street, which came out in 1958. Marcello's daughter, Chiara, actually voices Luca's mother in the French dub of the movie. She was the one who allowed the filmmakers to use her father's image in the movie. Hidden Mickey. During Luca's Vespa dream sequence, the circular clouds in the background form a hidden Mickey. Uncle Ugo. Uncle Ugo is voiced by actor and comedian Sacha Baron Cohen. Coco. One of the boats is named Elena. This could be a reference to Abuelita from the 2017 movie Coco. Her name was Elena Rivera. La Gazzetta. One of the newspapers is called La Gazzetta. This is a real Italian newspaper that's dedicated to various sports. Octopus. You can see an octopus etched in stone here. This could be a reference to Hank from the 2016 Pixar movie Finding Dory. Ercole Visconti. The main villain in this movie is named Ercole Visconti. Ercole is Italian for Hercules. One of Hercules' greatest flaws was his massive ego, which is very fitting since Ercole has a massive ego as well. His last name Visconti is a reference to an Italian noble family that ruled from 1277 to 1447. Ercole also looks like a younger version of Chef Skinner from Ratatouille. Focaccia. Ercole is eating a focaccia sandwich. Director Enrico Casarosa wanted to include focaccia bread because it's specific to that region of Italy. Later in the movie, you can see that Ercole's boat is named Focaccia. Phineas Flynn. Julia's character design is similar to the character of Phineas Flynn from the Phineas and Ferb series. They both have red hair, orange and white striped shirts, and blue pants. La Strada. There's a poster for the 1954 Italian drama movie La Strada here. The main character in the movie is named Gelsomina, which is also the name of one of the boats in Luca. Gelsomina is the Italian name for Jasmine, which could be a reference to Princess Jasmine from Aladdin. Furthermore, the actress who played Gelsomina in the La Strada movie was named Giulietta Massina, which is probably where the filmmakers got the name Giulia from. Julia's father even calls her Giulietta several times throughout the movie. Roman Holiday. You can see a poster for the 1953 romantic comedy movie Roman Holiday in the background here. This movie starred Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn, and their names are on the poster. La Luna. Julia's father looks like the dad character in the Pixar short La Luna, minus the arm of course. La Luna was written and directed by Enrico Casarosa. During the credits, you can also see the kid from La Luna, the Barber of Seville. When Luca and Alberto first meet Julia's father, the song playing in the background is from the Barber of Seville opera. Enrico Casarosa wanted to include a lot of opera in the movie because he grew up with that in his house. Machiavelli. Julia's cat is named Machiavelli. This is a reference to the Italian Renaissance philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. You can see a poster for the 1954 science fiction action adventure movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea here. This movie was personally produced by Walt Disney himself. Pinocchio. You can see a Pinocchio book in Julia's room. This was written by Italian author Carlo Collodi. Versions of Pinocchio the Fox and the Cat can also be spotted during Luca's imagination scene. Donald Duck. Donald Duck is a very famous cartoon character created by the Walt Disney Company. In Julia's room you can see a Donald Duck plush toy. Fake poster. There's a fake movie poster here with an actor named Julian Robertson on it. This is a reference to real actress Julia Roberts. Luxo Ball. The Luxo Ball first appeared in the Luxo Jr. short and has been featured in many other Pixar movies. In Luca you can see the Luxo Ball on the rooftop during the cycling portion of the Portorosso Cup race. Blue Umbrella. Alberto has a blue umbrella. This could be a reference to the 2013 Pixar short film The Blue Umbrella. Pizza Planet Truck. The Pizza Planet Truck first appeared in Toy Story, and it's appeared in every single Pixar movie since. In Luca, the Pizza Planet Truck isn't actually a truck, but rather a Piaggio Ape, which was made by the same company that made the Vespa. A113. A113 is a reference to the classroom number at the California Institute of the Arts, where many of the Pixar staff attended. In Luca, A113 can be seen on the train ticket that Alberto bought for Luca. Slippers. It says that this movie was produced in our slippers around the Bay Area. Due to the pandemic, Luca was the first Pixar movie made at home. Additionally, the train number that Luca boarded is 94608, which is the zip code for Emeryville, California, where Pixar's headquarters are located. Turning Red. Pixar movies usually have an Easter egg referencing the next movie. The next Pixar movie after Luca is Turning Red, which is scheduled to come out on March 11th, 2022. Enrico Casarosa confirmed that there was a Turning Red Easter egg in Luca, but it's very well hidden, and he didn't want to spoil any surprises for Turning Red, so it might be more of a later reveal. I'm not really sure what the Turning Red Easter egg in Luca was, so if you manage to find it, leave a comment. Voice cameos. Enrico Casarosa voices an angry fisher and a Scopa player. Furthermore, the character Alberto is based on Enrico's friend Alberto Saras. He voices a fisherman in the Italian dub of Luca. Furthermore, Chico is voiced by Peter Sohn, the director of The Good Dinosaur. Additionally, celebrity chef Gino D'Acampo voices the local priest in the UK release of Luca. Joke. The joke at the end is an old Italian joke for children. Basically, you introduce brace yourself, and then pull your handshake back at the right time. Roman emperors. Julia's mom has a dog named Nerone, and the turtle is named Caligula. These are both names of Roman emperors. Knife. During the end credits, you can see how Julia's father got Alberto a knife as a present. This is a callback to earlier in the movie, when Alberto wanted a knife before going on the fishing trip. Shazam. Jack Dylan Grazer voices Alberto in this movie. He also plays the character Freddie Freeman in Shazam and the sequel Shazam! Fury of the Gods. There are actually a bunch of similarities between Alberto and Freddie. Jack Dylan Grazer explained this in an interview with Looper. Here's what he said. You know something? I'm kinda thinking maybe Freddie Freeman and Alberto Scorfano aren't too different. I mean, obviously Freddie Freeman can't jump from a cliff because he's on a crutch, but they're both very confident and they both have a lot of charisma, and their sense of humor is great, and they both think very highly of themselves, despite their insecurities, which is funny. Comparing being in a Disney Pixar film to being part of the DCEU is pretty similar, because they both have such long legacies, and I grew up idolizing both. All of these things that are happening to me, it's unfathomable. I would have never dreamed of these things. I'm so full of gratitude. And those are all the Easter eggs, references, and hidden details that I was able to find in Luca. Did you notice or discover any more? If so, be sure to tell me. What did you think of Luca? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. I personally thought it was pretty decent. It's not Pixar's best movie or anything, but it was still quite enjoyable to watch. Be sure to check out some of the other Easter egg videos on this channel. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a future upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.